Johnny, should we take Kevin from New York?
Is that Kevin from New York? Kevin from New York?
It's
or is
Kevin
that
from New York. Kevin from New York.
It's the real deal, Kevin from New York? If so, yeah, let's take him.
Yeah. You wanted to talk with Kevin before him?
Hey, I talked to him on call screening. He's a nice guy. If that's the Kevin from New York I'm thinking about, yeah.
Okay, Kevin from New York. Are you the Kevin of New York?
Yeah, I'm him.
Okay, well, your reputation precedes you.
How you doing?
How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing good. Thanks for taking my call, you guys.
For sure. We are going to hold you to the fire, though, so I hope you're expecting that.
I don't want to hear about Planet X.
Or the pineal gland. But what have you got for us today?
Yeah.
Oh, it had to do with the claim that the subconscious mind is the mind of God. Now, I'm not going to talk about the pineal gland, actually. Instead, other things that we know for sure.
Okay, but before we get into all of that, you kind of threw a deepity at us, right? Kind of like a woo-woo statement that got me a little bit confused. So let's talk about what you're actually claiming first before we get into the reasons behind the claim. What does it mean when you say the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind is the mind of God?
What I mean by that is that it's something that we all have access to without knowing it.
Like air? Is that the only criteria? Because there are other things we have access to. We all take shits. Is shitting the mind of God?
It more has to do with dreams, because that's the closest that we come to having access to our subconscious mind.
Okay. Dreams we're tapping into the mind of God.
How do we know that? How do we know that that's the mind of God? And I beg your pardon, V, but how do we know that we're not tapping into the mind of, Morgoth or something, or the mind of something else? How do you know it's God and it's not a collective unconsciousness of humanity that we're tapping into?
Well, I come to the, I call it that myself because, that's the closest that we've come to understanding what God might be. And which,
it's the closest? How do you know? How did you measure that this is the closest we've ever come to what it might be? Who decides it's the closest?
Yeah, Kevin? Who is the we? Because you said we have. I'm curious.
No one asked me.
Oh, to explain that is because if we think that there's a God, then God would be, I guess, a person who could create something from nothing. And so that's why I brought up the concept of dreams, because it also works off the claim that man is made in the image of God, in which while we're dreaming, we have access to the subconscious mind.
Okay, but the dreams are not something out of nothing. Dreams are very specifically part of our chemical makeup in the brain and actually do a lot of important work flushing out the brain at night. And it also has to do with things that actually happen to us. And I don't know if this is actually true. So if somebody knows better, tell me in the comments, that I have heard that you cannot dream about a face you have not seen in real life. Like every face in a dream that you have seen at some point in real life. So your dreams are your brain recycling things that have happened to you in reality. So it doesn't come from nothing. Yes. So I'm not clear where that line is drawn.
Yeah, and Kevin, I'm hearing a lot of spoken and implied ifs here. If the human mind or the man is made in the image of God, if God exists as an entity of some sort, back up. Forget about all these contingent claims. Prove the ifs. Okay? Does God exist? If so, give us your evidence. What have you got?
But going back, I agree with what you said about dreams. the answer to your question was yes. But going back to dreams, it does work off of the human experience, but it is also randomized. But in such a way to where, strangely, it seems like in the state of dreaming, and this is recorded from people who have lucid dreams, that once you think about something, it becomes reality, even if you want it to or not. Or,
how do you define reality? Sorry, that's a tangent. I'm getting on a tangent. You're doing the Kevin thing. You're good at it. You're real good at it, Kevin.
Yeah. Every time we try to get out,
I'm gonna have to go back to the beginning. Okay, let us grant, for the sake of this argument, that the only thing we can know about God is that we can access that God through our dream states. Now what?
I may have said that wrong. Not access God, but experience characteristics of God.
Okay, so God gives us dreams, or we tap into God through dreams. What does that tell us about God, except that sometimes God thinks it's funny to throw me into high school without any clothes on?
But your high school is actually the mall that you used to go to when you were a kid. And
Yeah.
all of your coworkers are now your high school classmates. Yeah.
Well, just the claim that thought brings about the creation of a reality, and that's the characteristics I'm trying to bring to this argument for God. But
what brings about the characteristics of reality? I'm confused.
Just thought itself. Thought brings about the creation of reality in dreams specifically.
So thoughts create dreams, therefore other things can create things that are not dreams? That feels like a weird connection to make.
Are you saying that we can dream things into existence? Like we can cast out into the world our dreams and they are made manifest in the universe? Is this the secret?
Well,
that's what it sounds like, dude.
But I mean, that only depends on what you're talking about. I mean, if the goal is something realistic, then it can be worked for towards.
Okay.
But okay.
I want to. Yeah, go ahead, V. Sorry.
I'm going to pull back here. I'm going to look at my understanding of Kevin as opposed to the understanding of this particular argument, because this is a thing that we've talked about before. We've talked about this multiple times on multiple calls, which is something that you do that a lot of people do, but you should stop doing, which is you take one set of things that may or may not have a direct correlation to each other, right? We create dreams with our thoughts. And then you take this other set of things that have no actual connection to this set of things. And you say that because this set of things works in the same way, in one way, that this set of things works in the exact same way. You're drawing correlations between sets of things that don't necessarily connect at all. So in this case, you're talking about dreams and thoughts versus God being able to think the universe into existence. When you called about the pineal gland, you talked about what the pineal gland does in the brain, therefore what the soul does in the universe or in your body. And you're drawing these connections, and it's fun to do, but it doesn't actually prove anything outside of Kevin has a brain that puts things into categories, which is good. That's what brains do. You have a functioning brain. Congratulations. But it doesn't really do more than that. Are you seeing where I'm getting a little bit mixed up, Kevin?
I do draw connections to these things, and that's just it. I do see connections between them, and it works off of something that I said before, that I don't think that the brain, the consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, but consciousness is actually filtered by the brain. You know what I mean? Now,
I'm going to be honest, I don't. But the thing that I want to leave you with today is that is how we learn and grow. If you've ever played a game like The Witness, right? Where you're doing puzzles and you're running around this world, and every time you do a new puzzle, you draw connections back to a previous puzzle that you've done, and you're feeling, ooh, that feels good. That feels right. That is good. That is how we survive. That's how we make new discoveries. We draw connections between things. The entire point of doing research, of getting degrees, of training in a field is to make sure you know how to connect things correctly and when things connect and when things don't connect. So you're halfway there. You've made those connections. And I'm not denying that you have. I'm sure that in your brain, that is a very clear connection. The next step, not just with this question, but with all of the questions you've called in about so far, is make sure that you are making those connections correctly and that there's actually that tying thread between the two, because a lot of the time there really isn't outside of your perception of the thing. So I'm going to leave you with that. I'll let you finish out any last thoughts you've got, Kevin, or Johnny, of course.
I want to say something too. Kevin, give us something, and then I want to say something, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, another reason why I come to these sort of things is because, as I research the Bible and I also read apocryphal texts.
Mm-hmm.
Just the concepts. If you can just give me the benefit of doubt of the concept of God for a moment, in which we think of God as, say, the ultimate ruler of things, of the universe, of reality. Now, characteristics of that is the reason why I mention God as a ruler is because the only thing that would make a ruler good is if he followed his own rules. And so I get confirmation from that from an apocryphal text that God says that he cannot alter the things that has already gone out of his mouth. So
well, that would explain the contradictions in the Bible.
Kevin, I don't know if you had more, and thanks for that. I don't know what that really was, but I'll go back and watch that again and see if I can figure that out. You're letting the ifs do a lot of heavy lifting. You always do that. I've screened you a couple of times, and I enjoy when you call because I know it's going to be an interesting conversation. It's going to be outside of my usual everyday caller. I've seen you on the show a bunch of times. I always know it's going to be something that I hadn't thought of before. And so I do appreciate that. You got some creative thinking going on. But I wonder, is there ever a claim that you reject? Because it seems like you find something and then you say, well, if it's true, then I'm going to find these connections. And then I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to make the connections between this new claim and some other claims that I have. I think what you need to do is get your feet on the ground. And I've said this to you before on a call screen. Really, Kevin, are there any claims that you reject? And why did you reject those claims? I'm wondering, and I don't mean to disparage you or anyone else in the audience in any way, are you a Q supporter too?
Am I a what supporter?
QAnon.
Don't tell him. Johnny, if he doesn't
maybe
know,
I made a mistake.
Maybe
I made a mistake.
No, you have created a monster.
I tell you what, never mind.
No, I'm not a QAnon supporter.
Okay.
That's great. There are some claims that maybe you reject. I would try to falsify your claims before you go ahead and try to find connections. Try to figure out if you can falsify them. All right?
Okay.
Before you call in with another
conversation. Because I mean, you guys do bring a lot of challenges to my way of thinking too. You know what I mean?
That's wonderful. That's all we want to do.
Kevin, I like you.
Oh,
I like you.
No. You're a good egg, Kevin.
I agree with you with, actually. You know what I mean? But it still brings a lot of heavy questions I have in my mind. Like, I kind of don't want to say it because it's a different subject, but like, for example, the border between Christians and theists. But then the question that borders between them is, do we carry our experience with us after death, death of the body? And that's a really, really heavy question.
It is. It's an intense one.
Sure.
And I think that Kevin, next time you call in, because I know you're going to call again, I would love to dive into kind of the things that we have said and what it made you worry about, right? If we're bringing up some points that are sitting heavy, we want to talk about those things, right? We don't want to go off running after a shiny new thing. Sorry, Johnny, I feel like you take personal offense at that today.
Yeah,
we want to get down to the root of these questions. So if your heavy question, if what is weighing heavy on you right now is, are we finite beings and can we continue to experience or relive or exist after death? That is the conversation we need to be having, right? That is the conversation that's going to be interesting and get us somewhere. So call in again and we'll talk about that or something equally weighty. Let's go deep. Let's go deep. I'm not afraid, Kevin. Are you afraid?
No, not at all. For sure.
All right. All right. Sounds good.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for calling in, Kevin.
V, can I say something? Something that whenever Kevin calls or callers that are sort of in the Kevin ilk, it feels like watching a YouTube video where they're talking about the specs of the Enterprise or the Galactica, who would win in a space battle.
Yes.
Between a superstar destroyer and the TARDIS or something. It's a whole lot of spinning the wheels, and we can never really get at anything real there. And he comes back with another genre of imagination rather than anything grounded, and that's what it feels like every time. So,
yeah, exactly. There are. If we take any initial text, we can find connections to other things using it, right? I know that well. I was a nut for Lord of the Rings for years. Still am, frankly.
Is that true? I didn't...
You didn't know? You had no idea?
Didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. It's a surprise. I know. I come across as someone way too cool for that. But so for years, every time I saw, like, literally, I would be like, it smells like rain. Therefore, I am going to remember this particular scene from the book. Primarily the one where they leave Rivendell as the Nine Walkers. And Sam is not happy about it. But so, yes, you can start with any foundational text and draw conclusions from that. You can talk about the specs of the Enterprise, right? But regardless of how well you can do that, if the goal is to prove that foundational text, that needs to be predominant. That needs to be what your focus is before we can talk about what happens after.